Hello everyone, welcome to Women Work Your Faith. My name is Sylvia Johnson and today I am going to be covering the Sunday School Lesson for Sunday, November the 20th. The lesson topic for Sunday is Paul ministers in Malta. Our Bible basis is Acts 28 verses 1 through 10. Our Bible truth, we should be willing to minister to those in need. And the memory verse, and it came to pass that the father of Publius lay sick of a fever and of a bloody flu, to whom Paul entered in and prayed and laid his hands on him and healed him. That's Acts, the 28th chapter and the 8th verse, and that's the King James Version. Starting in the first chapter, the 28th verse, the narrator tells us, and when they were escaped. So this is after immediately following the shipwreck, and they had paddled or swam to shore, either on boards or splinters, or those who could swim swam. And so when they had escaped, when they had survived the shipwreck, then they knew that the island was called Malta. So they realized where they were. If you go back to the previous chapter, they saw the land, but they didn't really know where they had landed. And your text calls them the barbarous people, and they showed no little kindness. And so you have to watch, especially if you're reading in the King James Version, some of the translations, because the way that English was used at that time is not how we use it now. And so we will look at this and think of barbarians and that's not, and you know, we're thinking like TV show barbarians, you know, almost ape-like people. That's not what they were. They were people who also were not Roman citizens, and they weren't of the same culture. And so what we can see from that is that they weren't Jew and they weren't Romans. They were different, but they treated them with kindness. Not just kindness, but we see in the lesson great hospitality. And it's intriguing, and you know, you kind of have to wonder, did they know? This was a ship carrying criminals, right? Who were going to appear before Caesar and probably be sentenced to death. So here they are welcoming in someone that many of us would look at like, not my house. 276 people showed up on the coast, and it said that they showed them no little kindness, and they kindled a fire and received us every one. So not a single person that rolled up on the sandy beach was turned away. When we see someone come in to wherever we are, maybe it's our church, it's our neighborhood, it's our schools, it's, you know, our community, and you can see that they are in distress, that they have had a hard time. How do we handle them? Sometimes we get content in our way of saying, oh, I'm gonna pray for them, but I'm not gonna put my hands and feet to the work. Like, Lord, deliver them, but don't let me be the deliverer, okay? And that's not what the Lord calls us to be. And the truth is, for us, God provides examples. One of them is this one, of how we should handle people who are in need. So Paul is a witness for us in this, and how he was received, and then how he handles other people later on in the lesson. So now we move forward, and they are kindling the fire that was going to provide heat since it was raining and it was cold. And we see in the third verse that Paul is actually working with whomever to collect wood, and he gets some sticks and he lays them on the fire. Well, when he lays them on the fire, a viper, a snake, and so it implies that the snake was venomous, latches onto his hand. And you know, that ain't what you're expecting to happen. And it says it came out of the heat and fastened on his hand. And so the people who were native to the island saw this happen. And you know, how many of us have encountered superstitious folk, right? This happened, so it must mean this. Oh, this must be something like what people say now, karma, right? He must have been a murderer or something and thought he got away and survived the ocean, but it must not be his destiny to live. And so they're thinking that he's getting what he deserved, that justice is being served through the acts of this snake somehow, because this person should never have survived the shipwreck. It put me in the mindset of something that I read previously in the Word. If you remember when Jesus approached and Kenesha and I talked about this in an earlier video, I will link it below. When Jesus and the disciples approached the man born blind, and the disciples asked Jesus, who did sin that this man was born blind? And Jesus was like, no one. The disciples thought, oh, he must have done something, or his parents must have done something, or basically that through the acts of something somewhere, he deserved his present condition. And what Jesus clarified for them was that this affliction was not a punishment. It was a means through which the glory of God would be revealed to him. And he heals the man and opens his sight. So again, we see people here who see something negative happen to a person and think, or a person in a negative seeming situation, and think, oh, they must deserve that. But what we see again is that God is using this opportunity as a way to manifest himself. He is using this as a way to create a witness in Paul. He's using this as a way to make his name known to this island of natives that may not have heard of the God, the one true and living God. Now, I gave you one example of God doing this before in the Bible, but if you can think of another example of the Lord glorifying his name through someone's seeming affliction, drop it down in the comments so other people can, read and check them out. There are many times in the Bible where the Lord took what seemed like a horrible situation and made it into a blessing and made himself known. Now that I'm saying it, I can think of so many other times, but I don't want to take up all the time in the video doing that. So if you have another example, put it down in the comments of a time that the Lord's name was glorified through a bad situation. I'm laughing because in the next verse it tells you he shook it off. Now, this is a moment where you can kind of put yourself in Paul's situation. Here you are. You've had a rough couple of weeks, okay? You just survived an almost certain death situation. Now you're trying to get on your feet and get back to some sense of normal, even though your greater problem, right? Because Paul was still on his way to Rome to face judgment. Your greater problem hasn't gone away, but you're just trying right now in this moment to just breathe. And here comes something else. Haven't we had that experience before? And it's interesting to me when I think about him shaking it off. Because I think two things. One, our Sunday school lesson tells us that the words that they use are the same words that Jesus provided to the disciples when he gave them their instructions when they go out. And if they were not received, they were to shake the dust off their feet. And so to dismiss it, to loose yourself from it and go on, right? And so I'm looking at this situation, and some of us would have been done, okay? I'm fed up with this. This is enough. But Paul shook it off and went on. And we have to allow God to work on us because many of us will never get there on our own. So we need to let God work on us so that these things that come at us all the time, they don't penetrate. They don't change our focus. They don't change our character, our attitude, our demeanor. Jesus said, it's not what's on the outside, it's on the inside. That's what defiles the man, right? And when many of us are pressed, what's on the inside comes out. Actually, when all of us are pressed, what's on the inside comes out. And we see Paul being constantly pressed, constantly put to the fire, constantly being put to the test. And he is still remaining consistent in who he is, and that's a servant of the Most High. They saw that no harm came to him, and they changed their mind, and then they thought he was a god. So now we realize, that they're of probably a pagan belief. But they didn't know what to think of this, right? Because how many times have you seen someone get attacked by a creature that should have killed them and walk away with no harm at all? They were amazed by this. And it says they looked. So they were watching to see what would happen, to see if justice would be served. And if you think about it, it was. Nothing happened to him. For us as believers today, people are watching you. If you don't know, now you know. People are watching you. They are watching what happens to you and how you respond to it, or what happens to you and how you don't respond to it. And we have to think about that when we lose our cool. And someone will say, well, we're human and none of us is perfect, and God's still working on me. Well, let him work, okay? And ask him to help you come up a bit. We should not still be the same way we were before Christ. So if you used to go off on people and you a new creation, new don't mean old, so let that go. We got to remember that people are watching us, not necessarily just because, we need to be concerned about people passing judgment on us. We are witnesses for Christ. Does Christ look like that? Does Christ look like the person who falls out and screams, woe is me? Does Christ look like the person that goes off and throws things when they can't have their way? Does Christ quit and take his ball and go home? No, he does not. So we got to remember that people are watching us, and they are amazed by the witness that they see in us when we do things that are reflective of Christ, and it gives them hope. We're coming up on the last portion of the lesson, and it tells us that a man who was of great status and probably a leader on the island, his name is Publius, and he has welcomed them and received them, and he provides lodging for them. And during that time, Paul finds out that the father of this man is ill. It says that he had a bloody flu, meaning that he had a very nasty disease. Okay, this is not he had a headache or he had a runny nose. We're thinking vomiting and diarrhea, right? This and this is not like it was at this time, where they've got gloves and they've got sanitation and they've got we're on an island here in ancient Rome, not in the city of Rome, but in the colonies, and there's a man with a disgusting disease that is probably going to kill him. And Paul is not hindered by that. It says he entered in and prayed, and not only did he pray, but he laid hands on that man and healed him. Now, Paul was a Jew. He laid hands on that man. We talked about this a while back when we did a video on the Good Samaritan. Yes, I'll link it below. But when we talk about people who passed by someone in need, a lot of times they have reason in their minds why they shouldn't interfere, why they shouldn't help. And it would have been very easy for Paul to say, oh, I'm just a prisoner. Oh, that man's unclean. Oh, these people are heathens and Gentiles. He could have pulled out any number of stipulations as to why he should have nothing to do with these folk. But the power of God in him was greater. The move of God, the will of God. And if you want to go back and look in the 26th chapter of Acts, 15 through 18, when Paul gives his testimony, he tells what the Lord said to him when he called him. And it says, delivering thee from the people and from the Gentiles, unto whom now I send thee. He was supposed to be with those people. He was supposed to help those people. He was supposed to convert those people. And he wasn't going to do that with his comfort zone and boundaries blocking the way. And we have to ask ourselves who we are. Are we disciples of Christ? Well, what was the point of Christ, right? And if the purpose is to make God known in the earth and to teach Jesus Christ and him crucified, you're not going to be able to do that if you've got all these reasons why you can't talk to, can't touch, can't be with, can't hang around this, that, and the other. We've got to let go of those rules that we keep to keep us from working too hard, to keep us from giving too much, to keep us from experiencing things we don't want to experience. And we must say, nevertheless, Lord, thy will be done. So he lays hands on the man and he heals him. Well, when this is done, other people come to him and they've got diseases and they got healed too. So Here he is now, a prisoner who's working and ministering to strangers. Are you ministering to people when you're in what appears to be your worst case scenario? Because Paul had it rough. Again, like, yeah, he was treated with hospitality on the island, but you would still have been shipwrecked and tossed about in the ocean, and you were still on your way to trial. He was in a tough situation, but instead of focusing on himself, he met the needs of the people with the power that God gave him to minister to these people. So we're used to Paul preaching and speaking in the name of the Lord, but here we see him just helping people and being a witness. And it says they honored us with many honors, and when they departed, they gave them the things that they needed for their journey. So this island that was hospitable, thank you, Holy Ghost. Lord gave me something else. This island that was hospitable welcomed them and maintained their hospitality. And when they left, and I think they left maybe like 3 months or so later, it wasn't like an overnight stay. When they left, they gave them the things that they needed for their journey. And again, what the Lord brought to my mind was a workman is worthy of his meat. So Paul got there, he shook off the non-welcoming party, right? the viper that came in and attacked him. But then those who appreciated his ministry, him being there, he was reciprocated and given what he needed. Not only was he reciprocated, the lesson doesn't tell us anybody else was on the island healing, but they provided everybody with what they needed. And so again, we see Paul being a blessing simply because he was there. Okay, so going back to our lesson aim that we chatted about in the beginning. First one was know how Paul helped people on the island of Malta. And now we know that Paul healed the sick on that island. And not just he healed the sick, but he was a blessing to the island, the whole island, which were, idol worshipers, non-Jews, Gentiles. And they were blessed by his presence on the island. And it says, appreciate the ways others minister to us. And, like in modern terms now, we think minister is that person that stands in the pulpit and preaches over the podium at you. And that is a ministry. But ministering is, taking care of something, nurturing and providing for. And it is not just speaking at something. And we've gotten really lazy in our ministry. I might say that again. We have gotten really lazy in our ministry. It has become just talk. And I really like this lesson because Paul doesn't say anything. Not a word in this whole lesson. And so we have got to watch our ministry, and one, because other people are watching our ministry, and make sure that it's a living, breathing thing that is doing. And if by chance you didn't know that you need to do, the final point in the lesson aim is and minister to those in need. If you don't understand the doing, my recommendation is that you read James, the whole book. It's pretty short. He's a very poignant fellow, and he gets right to the point. But he teaches us about how our faith is made evident through our works. I don't have faith because of the work I do. The work I do is a result of my faith. It teaches you what I believe. It teaches you who I know, whose I am. Paul said that when he was going to get shipwrecked. The Lord God, whose I am and whom I serve. That's the same way we should be. When people see my walk and my actions, they ought to be able to recognize my faith by what I am doing. So, with that being said, that was a lot in 10 little verses. But I hope you enjoyed it. And that you peep down in the description box for the videos that I mentioned. And also that you put your comments in the comment section. The question that I said was, if you can remember another time in the Word, in the Bible, where God's name was glorified through an affliction or a seemingly negative situation, put a reference down in the Bible for other people. Put a reference down in the comments for other people to check out. Make sure you hit that like button if you enjoyed the lesson. and send us a message. We love hearing from you. Be blessed, and we will see you next time. Thank you.